Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today's video has been very kindly sponsored by Squarespace. We're going to discuss more about that later on. But in today's video, I'm going to give you a complete end of season guide, which should hopefully allow you to navigate the final 10 game weeks of the season. We're going to discuss blank game week 32, which has now been confirmed, and future double game weeks as well. If you enjoyed today's video, please do drop a like, drop a comment down below, make sure to subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So I'm going to try and present this information as clearly as possible. I've re-recorded this section 3 times because I keep on overcomplicating it and going in a really dodgy order. So let me try and break it down very simply. Game week 32 is a blank game week for Manchester United, Chelsea, Brighton and Man City. So those 4 teams will be blanking due to the FA Cup semi-finals. So we know that for a fact now. The reason this is difficult for us is a lot of us will own players from these 4 teams already. So as I've said as an example here, I have 7 players currently that blank in game week 32 from these 4 teams, and due to my predicted transfers in 29 and potentially 31 too, I'm likely to have 9 players as a minimum that are blanking in game week 32. That of course causes a huge issue because I can only bench 4 of them if we include the keeper, 3 of them if we don't. So I'm looking at probably only having 5 or 6 outfield players for this week. Luckily, I have the free hit, and I've been saying for a while now because we've had a good idea of which teams would blank, that free hit 32 makes a lot of sense. But I know some people either won't want to play their free hit in 32 for some reason, maybe they want to play it in a double, or you've already played your free hit. So I'm going to try and help you in this video navigate the future weeks, especially game week 32, with the idea that even if you don't have your free hit, you can potentially still navigate those weeks. The reason it is also really tricky is because these 4 teams here, as we'll discuss in a second, are all having at least 1 double for the remainder of the season, and Manchester United, Brighton and Man City have at least 2 doubles for the remainder of the season. So you don't really want to be selling assets from these 4 teams, even though they're blanking 32, when you're going to want them back for future doubles. So that's why it makes sense to just free hit them out just for 32, and so actually what you want to be doing in the next few weeks is actually loading up on players from these 4 teams. So that's why 32 is such a tricky blank, even though it's only 4 teams, which is actually a very small blank week. It's very tricky because you don't really want to be selling assets from these 4. So I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that was nice and simple. Those are the 4 teams that will be blanking in Game Week 32. Let's now move on to future doubles and explain why it's so difficult to navigate Game Week 32. So this information was provided by the wonderful Ben Crellin over on Twitter. You can see his handle at the bottom, BENCRELLIN. Go make sure you follow him, go support him, because he does absolutely fantastic work and he really helps out content creators such as myself. So what he did is he put out a tweet, essentially what I've done here, I've just put a nice graphic on it, presenting the upcoming doubles for the remainder of the season for all of the clubs that can have doubles. So on your screen, all of these clubs will be the ones that have doubles, and the clubs that aren't on your screen will not have any more doubles, and we'll discuss that in the next section as well. The number next to each of these clubs is how many double game weeks they have after game week 29. So we're ignoring game week 29 for now because that's next week. You can look at the teams that double on the official site. So after game week 29, Brighton have 3 more doubles. Manchester United and Man City have 2 more doubles, and then Chelsea, Liverpool, West Ham, Fulham and Newcastle all have 1 further double game week this season. Now, the 2 big double game weeks that we are going to have is game week 34 and game week 37. So for Brighton, Man United and City, they are going to be doubling in both 34 and 37, whereas Chelsea, Liverpool, West Ham, Fulham and Newcastle, at the time of me recording this, we do not yet know if they will double in 34 or 37. It'll be one or the other. Now, that information should come out during the international break, but I have a feeling it will be towards the back end of the international break, which is why I'm making this video nice and early. So hopefully that makes sense. So Brighton will double in both 34 and 37. And then they also have another double in either 31, 35 or 36. And that double game week is with Newcastle. So as you can see at the bottom of your screen, Newcastle, the only team that won't be doubling in 34 or 37. It will be one of 31, 35 or 36. Now, Ben Crellin, James from Planet FPL, Lego Mane, all of the guys that are out there that predict double game weeks and blank game weeks, they are predicting that it will be in game week 31. And again, we should get that information over the international break. If we don't get that information over the international break around Newcastle and Brighton doubling in 31, we can say with pretty much full certainty that it will no longer be in game week 31, and we're probably looking at 35 or 36 instead. All of that to say that Brighton have 3 more double game weeks this season. So this is why I've got absolutely no intention of selling my Brighton assets. And it's another reason why free hit 32 makes so much sense, because you don't want to sell your Brighton assets that blank in 32, because after that, they're going to have a double in 34, 37, and then potentially one in 35 or 36. So you want to have 3 Brighton assets. You want to have probably the best 3 Brighton assets you can. It's probably worth using transfers to get the optimal 3 as well. It's a similar situation with Man City and Man United. Again, 2 teams that blank in 32, but will be doubling, almost definitely doubling in both 34 and 37, and they're pretty decent doubles as well. Chelsea, of course, like I said, will be blanking in 32, and they will double in either 34 or 37. So we don't yet know that. We can try and predict it, but I'll just say for now it'll be one of those. And then Liverpool, West Ham, Fulham and Newcastle will all have a double game week, but no more blank weeks. So that might be interesting for those of you that are on a free hit, as we'll discuss in the next section, that actually these are 4 teams where you will get a double game week from them, but you don't have to worry about not having them in game week 32. So hopefully that's clear with the upcoming doubles. Like I said, 34 and 37 are going to be the 2 biggest ones. And then there'll be a small one with Brighton and Newcastle both doubling in one of 31, 35 or game week 36. So what I've done in this graphic is I've listed the number of fixtures that every team has from game week 30 to game week 38. The most with Brighton with 11, and then there are quite a few teams with 9. All of the teams with 9 fixtures simply just don't have any further doubles and blanks. So everywhere from Bournemouth down to Southampton just don't have any blanks, don't have any doubles, which is nice and safe. Again, if you just want to bring in players that you know will play every week, or from teams that will play every week, then that's probably nice and safe to do. As you can see, Brighton, Chelsea, United and City, I've put an asterisk and they've got a green box around them because, yes, they have a lot of fixtures, but they do blank in 32. That actually makes them more valuable if you're going to free hit in 32, because you remove the fixture that they blank in and then you can have them for both of their doubles, or in Brighton's case, all 3 of their doubles. I've also got a yellow square around Newcastle, Fulham, Liverpool and West Ham. The reason for that is they have 10 fixtures too, but as we discussed in the last section, they don't blank. So Newcastle, Fulham, Liverpool, West Ham will give you a double game week, but you don't have to worry about not having a player in 32. So what I'm basically suggesting there is, if you aren't going to free hit in 32, either because you prefer it in a double week or because you've already played it, then you can bring in players from Newcastle, Fulham, Liverpool, West Ham, and you'll get at least 1 extra fixture with them, which is really, really nice there, and you don't have to worry about not having them in the blank. So maybe, maybe if you're not going to free hit, I would be looking at probably like Newcastle defence, maybe a Newcastle attacker such as Isak, or potentially Wilson if you feel like he's going to be starting, and then someone like a Salah could be worth getting for double game week 29 and beyond, because you're going to have them for a future double too and no blanks. West Ham could be interesting as well. I've seen people looking at the likes of Bowen, Benrahma, maybe a goalkeeper if you're like, if Areola you feel like is going to continue to keep his place. So there are some players that you can pick from those teams. And as you can see, Bournemouth, Palace, Villa, Leicester and Tottenham have got an orange square around them. They are the teams, according to the Fantasy Football Hub ticker, with the best fixtures for all of like the single game week teams from 30 to 38. So whilst Bournemouth, Palace, Tottenham, Leicester and Villa won't give you any double game weeks, they are teams that might be worth investing in just because they have decent fixtures. So it might be that you want to bring in the likes of a James Maddison, or you might want to keep a hold of Harry Kane, or maybe you are looking at an Ollie Watkins to hold throughout the remainder of the season. So these are teams that might be worth investing in too. And again, all of these teams apart from Palace do double, and Spurs I should say, double in 29 too. So if you're looking for a transfer for 29, Leicester, Villa and Bournemouth might be 3 teams that are worth investing in. So hopefully that helps you depending on your situation. I can't advise for every single person. If you're free hitting in 32, I would look at anywhere from Brighton to West Ham. If you're not free hitting in 32, then maybe don't start loading up on the likes of Brighton, Chelsea, United and the City. Unless you're just going to completely sacrifice game week 32, it might be worth instead looking at Newcastle, Fulham, Liverpool and West Ham. In the final section, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present 2 wildcard drafts. Even if you're not on wildcard, it should help you, because it gives you a bit of an idea about how you'll navigate. I'm going to present a wildcard draft if you are free hitting in 32, which is basically loading up on the other teams that we spoke about. And I'm going to present a wildcard draft if you can't free hit in game week 32, and discuss where you might have to potentially sacrifice for 29 and game week 30. So guys, what I've got here is a rough game week 29 wildcard, but it kind of also, I guess, would work roughly for game week 32, where you are able to free hit in 32. And again, if you do still have your free hit, and especially if you're going to wildcard this week, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't free hit in 32. The reason that I wouldn't free hit in 34 or 37 personally, although it is still slightly team dependent, is just because, like I said, the players that you would probably want for 34, you're also going to want for 37, and you'll probably want for the other weeks as well, because you're bringing in players like Brighton, Man United, Man City and Chelsea, who are good teams with good assets. So I don't feel like it makes sense to target 34, 37 when you probably just want to bring in those players long term. 32 is probably the issue. So this is the way the team will look for 29. Essentially, you've got your 11 double game week players in your starting 11. You, of course, couldn't bench boost if you wildcarded this week. So what I've done is I've actually chucked Haaland on the bench. rather than not having him, rather than going for a Harry Kane and then moving on, or going for a Tony, I've just gone for Haaland in 29. You can slap him on the bench. I guess you could start him if you wanted to, but then you'll have him in place for 30 and beyond. As you can see, I've got Ederson as well. I know the Ederson-Kepa rotation didn't work very well previously, but Ederson is likely to double in 34 and 37. So the week that Kepa doesn't double, you can have Ederson in there instead, and he's fine for other weeks as well. And money isn't a massive issue in this team. So this is just a rough draft of what it would look like for 29. In game week 30, you'd obviously bring Haaland back in. You could give Haaland the armband. If in game week 31, by the way, I'm using FPL.team. This is FPL.team, the site. If you scroll down and click set projected fixtures from Planet FPL, the guys over at Planet FPL have created a rough schedule of what they think the fixtures will be, and this predicts it. So as you can see, game week 31, if we are suggesting that it probably is going to be a double game week for Newcastle and Brighton, you can see I've got the double Newcastle, triple Brighton, and the team's looking really strong in and around that. So I would have 5 double game week players. This week, in game week 32, this is why you would free hit with this team, because the team's just an absolute mess and you just wouldn't have any players left. I've got Trippier and Fabian Schär against Tottenham, which isn't an issue. I think regardless of what team you have, you'll probably have double Newcastle defence. And then I've got Maddison and Watkins. So I actually only have 4 players here. Now, of course, you could build a wild card where you have slightly more, but I feel like if you do have your free hit in your back pocket, this just makes a lot of sense. I'll skip through the single game weeks because the team just looks fine, obviously, in those. In game week 34, if the fixtures fall the way that James from Planet FPL has predicted, you'll have Ederson, Estepinian, Shaw, McAllister, Matoma, Fernandes, Rashford, and Haaland. So 8 double game week players there. Really good single game week players. And then for game week 37, you would actually have 10 double game week players, or 11 including Kepa on the bench, and Maddison is the only single game week player there in the starting 11. And again, you could transfer him out for a double game week player that week. So you're probably looking at 8 or 9 double game week players for 34. You're looking at 11 double game week players probably for game week 37. And then for 32, if you can free hit, you're looking at having a full team in that week too. And you've probably got a full team of double game week players in 29. So you're in a really strong position. If you are still holding on to the wild card and you play a wild card similar to this, and this is the way that the fixtures fall, which we should hopefully know very, very soon, then you are going to have a very strong end to the season. I have absolutely no doubt about that. So that is a wild card with free hit in mind. Let me now show you a wildcard where you could still play your wildcard, but you don't have the free hit to use in game week 32. And unfortunately, you do have to make a few sacrifices. So guys, very briefly, here is a wildcard draft where you don't have a free hit left to use, or you aren't going to be using it in 32. And the team is kind of similar. There are just a few places where you've just got to go slightly different. And basically, you just have to not bring in as many players that blank in 32 and instead go for a few other picks, which isn't necessarily a huge issue. And you might actually say makes the team stronger because you're not fixating on specific weeks. So, for example, this team now has Kane in it. This team now has Saka and Gabriel and Mings. And I've also got Melier on the bench because he has a decent fixture against Fulham, I believe, in game week 32. Outside of that, the team's not that too dissimilar. The rest of the players are exactly the same as the previous one. You've just got slightly less double game week players, and you've got to bring in a few players that also play in 32. And Arsenal have a really nice fixture against Southampton in 32, so it's probably worth having a couple of assets there. So 29, I would say the team looks slightly weaker, but not necessarily significantly weaker. Again, you can't bench boost if you wildcard in 29. Game week 30, the team looks fine. Going into 31, I suppose the only slight issue here is that you only have 2 Newcastle, which is the same, but only 2 Brighton. So you're missing 1 Brighton asset, and you probably can't bring in a 3rd Brighton asset because then that just makes your team weaker for 32, which is the following week. So you might miss out slightly in 29 and slightly in 31. But then going into 32, you've immediately got 9 blank game week players. And remember, you would have had 2 free transfers last week or 2 free transfers this week. So you've got transfers to use. And at this stage, if you want to, you can take out your Brighton assets, but I probably wouldn't advise it because they'll double in 34 and double in 37. You could take out Haaland just for the week. Someone like a Gabriel Jesus. You could take out Rashford at this point, but again, I wouldn't advise it because he doubles in 34 and 37. So probably at this stage, what I would do is I would just play with 9 players. But at least the 9 players are decent. You've got Kane and Saka. You've got a few decent defenders. You've got Melier in goal. The team looks a little bit stronger for 32. And you're probably still going to be slightly better off than most people that don't have the free hit. You are going to fall slightly behind the likes of myself who has a free hit and can pick freely. For example, I'll probably bring in Liverpool players. I think they've got Forest that week in 32. Yeah. So they've got Forest at home. So I'll probably have like triple Liverpool. So at this stage, I guess you could switch from Haaland to Salah. But again, then you're going to want Haaland back in for game week 34 and 37. So this is why it is tricky, and this is why if you have the free hit, it just makes sense. I won't keep going on about it, but that's why it makes sense to play it in 32. But if you don't, I suppose what I'm saying here is it's not an absolute disaster, because if you go forwards to sort of game week 34, again here, you don't have as many double game week players in game week 34, but you've at least still got a few. And then in 37, you've got probably 7, 8 double game week players once again. The only thing I would say around this is it makes your team probably significantly weaker all the way from 29 to 38. The other option you have, which I'm not necessarily sure I'll advise, but I guess I'll look into how bad this would be, is maybe you just neglect game week 32. You build the wild card in the way that I showed in the first section, because the team's just so strong for all of the upcoming doubles, and you just accept that 32 is going to be pretty rough, because as we saw in game week 28, in a blank game week, they're pretty low scoring anyway. If you can nail captaincy, you've got, for example, if you'd have captained Salah, if you captained Saka in game week 28, you would have got 36 points alone there, which was close to some people's score. So maybe in 32, you just say, actually, I'm just going to fill 5 or 6 players. I'm not going to focus too much on a specific blank game week, and just hope that I nail captaincy and have the few players that do score well. That's another option. And then outside of that, you don't have to neglect your team. There are different ways to approach it, but I guess hopefully this video has been helpful just to show you what the upcoming blanks look like, the upcoming doubles in 34, 37, and then the small one elsewhere for Brighton and Newcastle. So let me know if that was helpful, and let me know what your current strategy is down below. So guys, there you have it. That is my ultimate end of season guide. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Before we go, I do just want to give a massive shout out to Squarespace, as they have sponsored today's video. Squarespace allows you to connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated members only content. You can manage your members, send email communications, and leverage audience insights all on one easy to use platform. When it comes to setting up the site, it genuinely couldn't be easier, and I truly do mean that. There are tons of templates to choose from, as well as videos and support messages to guide you throughout the process. One of the things that I love about Squarespace is the ability to display posts from your social profiles on your website. So you can automatically push website content to your favorite social media channels so that your followers can share it too. If you go to squarespace.com/FPLRaptor or click the link in the description, you can get access to a 14-day free trial and save 10% on your first purchase of a website or a domain. So as I said, please do check out Squarespace. There will be a link in the description and in the pinned comment as well. Make sure to check them out. It helps to support the channel massively, but it is honestly a brilliant product as well. Super easy to use. Until next time, guys, thank you very, very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.